In the late 1970s, Don Imus was, by his own admission, so out of it from drugs and alcohol that he called in sick 100 times in one calendar year. That's twice a week. I was a personal witness in 1978 to his tortured inability to negotiate his way from the sidewalk of New York's East 67th Street into the lobby of Channel 5 television here, because there was one glass door facing him from the street, and then inside another one to his left into the lobby, and he was paralyzed with confusion by them. Our fourth story on the countdown is a guy who can come back from that kind of haze to work another 29 years in radio and TV, really finish just because he's been suspended twice and fired twice in a span of only 4 days. John Donald Imus Jr. was born in 1940. After a stint in the Marines and a time as a brakeman on the Southern Pacific Railroad, he talked his way into radio at Palmdale, California in 1966. 3 years later, he was in Cleveland. 2 years after that, in New York, presenting Between the Rock and Roll Records, a satirical irreverence, perhaps summed up by the title of an album he released of his best radio bits, called 1,200 Hamburgers to Go, from a bogus phone order to a fast food restaurant he did live on the air one day. After the comeback from cocaine and vodka, his music show gradually evolved into a current affairs program, which was nationally syndicated as of 1993, and when this news network signed on in 1996, became televised for the first time. All of it after years of broadcasting from the edge of the precipice, crashing down after what he said about the Rutgers women's basketball team a week ago yesterday. So what's next? Sam Seder is a veteran of radio and comment, host of the Sam Seder Show on Air America Radio. Sam, good evening.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
So is Don Imus's career over, or is it just these two jobs?
You know, I think it's really a function of what he wants to do. I mean, he could, I'm sure there's somebody out there who would give him a job. It's just a question of whether or not he's willing to take a massive pay cut, and really a pay cut in stature. I mean, from my perspective, I think he enjoyed the notion of the media elite and, frankly, some of the political elite showing up on his show, and I'm not sure that he can get those people anymore.
Boke Carter, I always like to invoke this story. Most popular newscaster of the late 30s, summarily dismissed one day by CBS, largely because he was, in essence, making the news up. He got another job at Mutual Radio, same year, not the same platform, not the same money, but he could still work. Dr. Bob Harris, who was a famous weatherman in radio and TV in New York City, one day his boss gets this anonymous letter from an old classmate. Dr. Bob not only didn't have a doctorate in meteorology, he'd never finished college, fired on the spot, and the next Monday he's back on the air in New York City at another station for more money. If he wanted to continue, even if it were a different set of circumstances with Imus, could he?
You know, I think so. It's sort of tough right now. I mean, because you've got Sirius and XM right now trying to merge. So I don't know if XM, for instance, would be willing to step up and put him on satellite and give him the type of money he wants. I mean, I suppose, look, people put on all sorts of things on radio, and I'm sure he could find a job somewhere, even if it's a local morning show, I guess. It really comes down to is he willing to take a huge cut in pay and stature? And frankly, at his age, I don't know if he is.
Apart from this all sounding like a sort of live reenactment of this classic 50s film with Andy Griffith called A Face in the Crowd, about a yokel who becomes a TV influence and then gets caught muttering under his breath about the audience and gets fired from the absolute pinnacles of the industry. Are there lessons in here? Is there something about this situation that you and people who are on the radio every day are going to be thinking about in the context of what happened to Imus?
Well, I mean, I think the real lesson here is that you can't really have your cake and eat it too. I mean, if you're going to accept the cachet that comes with talking to pillars of our society to a certain extent, I mean, people who are genuine influence peddlers in this country, then you can't speak like this. You can't express these type of racist views. And I think basically, I think the other lesson is that you can't get away with it anymore. I mean, I think this is a function of the internet and increased cable coverage. Maybe 10 years ago he could have said this thing and it would have just sort of floated away in the ether, but now people hear it and record it and replay it.
All right, then I'll ask you the $10 million question. How does Rush Limbaugh or Michael Savage get away with worse than what Don Imus said?
I'll tell you, well, I think one, there's a certain expectation that they're going to hear it more from Limbaugh, although, you know, he and Dick Cheney was on his program several weeks ago. I listened into Limbaugh today, and he's already warning his audience that they're going to be coming for Limbaugh next. And I think, frankly, he's got to be a little bit worried now because the bar has just been raised. I mean, corporations have said, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And the next time Limbaugh slips up, and which I think is inevitable, I think you're going to see the sort of same type of reaction.
It's the best thing I've heard in a couple of days.
I hope so.
From your lips to God's ears. Sam Seder of the Sam Seder Show on Air America. Great thanks, Sam. Good night.
Thanks, Keith.